was an absolutely beautiful day, and there's no denying that. There's no story that differs from that moment. You know, I dropped the kids off at their schools. There were between the 5 kids, there were 3 schools, and I say that part for a reason. And then, you know, I remember coming home and I'm doing my usual. I have one home with me, and I'm watching the news, and I remember thinking, I see this plane hit the building, and I thought, okay, even I can parallel park. Like, are you kidding me? I never thought for 1 second, this is my head, never thought for 1 second this was terrorism. Why would I think that? My friend calls up, she goes, oh my God, are you watching the news? The next phone call that comes in is Joe telling me that he doesn't know, the city's gone, I'm not gonna use his words, the city's gone insane. He doesn't know what the expletive is happening. He's on his way down there, but he'll try and call later. He just doesn't know what's happening. Stay off the news was the last thing he said. I said, okay. That was at 9:06 in the morning. Didn't hear from him again for almost 48 hours. You know, I knew he was okay because there had been check-ins. You know, they're like, so you could call a firehouse and they could tell you, you know, oh no, he checked in, we saw, we got him. You know, it didn't start right away, but it started in time enough. But there was no cell phone service. There was no nothing. There was no way, but who knew that at the time for him to call? So we'll go back to that moment though, of when I realized what was happening. I went to the 3 different schools and grabbed the kids, even though the teachers were saying, don't leave them where they are. My whole thing was I didn't know what had happened to Joe, if anything. So my thing was, this wasn't just to leave them where they are because they're safer. This was I need them home with me in case I get a phone call or something, or car pulls up, something. So yeah, that was a little rough because you want to watch the TV because you're glued to it. You're glued to every second. You're even looking to see, can I see somebody? Do I know somebody? It was the strangest behavior. Kids are running around. They have no idea what's going on. The phone's just ringing like crazy. Cars are driving by my house because they automatically assume your husband is one of the 343. There was no number at the time, but they assume your husband is a city fireman. He's in the area. It's got to be him. So they do the slow drive by and they, you know, kind of leer. It was a little unnerving. On the phone with a bunch of wives that whole night, just going back and forth of stories, funny stories, you know, anything. And I just remember the next day, truth of this story was that I woke up with a bottle of wine in my hand thinking, are you kidding? And I don't drink, but this was us on the phone, just trying to laugh, trying to make light of it, you know. And the part of the story though, that will stick with me forever, that I will never not get unburnt in my skull, is at the preschool that 2 of my kids went to. There was another fireman's family. And I remember when we picked up the kids, we did the nod. Like, you know, everything is going to be okay. Like we, you know, because you had started to hear what had happened. And it was several days later that we pulled up at the same time because, you know, you wanted to try to get some little bit of normalcy. You didn't really know what was going on. So I could say it could have been up to about a week later. We pull up at the same time. We don't even make eye contact. Her husband had passed away. It was the most surreal moment of my entire life because here we were, same children, same ages, dropping them off at the same school, picking them up at the same school. Our lives were parallel up until that moment. Like that one exact moment changed everything. Now we couldn't even look at each other anymore because her life went in one direction, mine went in another. It literally, I will never forget that eye contact ever. I can remember every other little detail. That will always haunt me. That will always hurt me. Because it could have been anything, you know? Yeah. And just, you know, trying to keep the kids away from the stories and the situation, that didn't come for quite a few days later because they didn't go back to school right away. You know, not until we knew Joe was okay. But I just remember it being my favorite part of the world is September 10th was the last normal day. The last normal day, but you can't remember anything about that day. But you remember everything you've done from September 11th on. Everything. Try to remember September 10th, though. I missed that day. I missed September 10th. You know, and I get the whole never forget thing, but, you know, you and I have discussed this a bunch of times. We never knew we had an option to forget. It's never been forgotten, ever. From that day, from September 11th forward, like every one of my children have a different story, the same story, but their little minded version. Some were older, some were younger, some could grasp it, some couldn't. You know, but yeah, like I crave September 10th.
But your life, little did you know then that your life would change in so many ways. When did Joe first start getting sick, or when did you realize, oh my God, something's not right here?
Well, it was a few years later. The exact amount of time, I don't know. There was always a sinus infection. There was always the GERD, which is the acid reflux. There was always some sort of, you know, infection, something that came along with, but you didn't really start to associate it with 9/11 yet. You know, you just sort of went, oh, he's an old time fireman. He's got his habits. He's got whatever going on. And yeah, until all of a sudden though, everybody, it was all of them, the same thing. Yeah, they all eat firehouse food. Okay, some firehouses are, you know, 10-course chefs. So how are you all have GERD? What's the common denominator? You don't all smoke. Some of you are athletes. Here was the common denominator. Here it started. So I would say probably a good 5 or 6 years into, after 9/11, did he start with the symptoms? But nothing compared to the final symptom, which was the pancreatic cancer, which was 2 years ago. And literally took him by storm. It was 8 months from the day of diagnosis. A little bit prior to that, did he have some crazy symptoms? But everybody kept, he went to doctors. Everybody kept kind of blowing it off, going, no, that's pancreatic cancer doesn't hurt. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here was the tumor, here it was done. So yeah, that was 17 years after 9/11. And we are still the same story over and over again. Same, you know, I spoke to another fireman the other day, and it's the same thing. Like everybody still, there was a huge wave a couple of years ago of where it was literally every other day you heard from somebody either being diagnosed or actually passing away. It seems to have slowed down a little bit, but not to what we think. Now we're seeing a lot of skin cancers, a lot of, maybe not, the word I want to use is not fatal, because skin cancer of course can be, but what I'm saying is now all of a sudden we seem to be at a low again, and I think at some point it's going to peak again. I think we definitely have not seen the end of it.
But before Joe got sick, you were dealing with his PTSD. Oh. Tell us what that was like and the impact that has had and still has on your family today.
Yeah, that the PTSD thing, that was something no one talked about. They just didn't talk about it. Why would they? We didn't talk about it with anyone. I knew what was happening with Joe. It was, you know, sometimes it was waking up in the middle of the night screaming. The other part was I have this thing that I do where my life revolves around Vicks. Everything in the world revolves around Vicks. I feel like Vicks can cure world hunger. You know, if you let it, it cures everything. And I couldn't understand why Joe would get triggered. Had no idea what it was until the day I was putting it on the kids. And this was years into the PTSD triggers. It was Vicks that was triggering the smell of it. because they used to take it and put it up their noses to mask the smell of the pile. It was just a trick they did, and I didn't realize that I had been triggering him for so long because that smell would set him off. You know, we had two lives at one point where we did what we had to do in our house. He was never violent. It was never anything like that. It was to himself. You know, it was the demons in his head. And it was 9/11. Just no matter what he saw in his head, he couldn't describe it. He couldn't tell you what was wrong, even if you asked, because either he didn't want to tell you what was wrong or he just couldn't articulate it. So it manifested into all these like self-loathing things. Like everything he did in his eyes was wrong. He just couldn't do anything right. Yeah, there was that one story that I had told you a while ago about one night, it was the middle of the night. I had woken up, Joe wasn't in the room and in the bedroom, and I gone downstairs, all the lights are out, and he immediately tells me to stop. We found something, don't move. Whether he was visualizing he was on the pile and they found something, so don't move, like you can't move from this area. We had stood there for probably about 3 to 4 hours and then just walked away like it had never happened. You know, and you know, we talked about it with the kids, like there were lots of things that some of them, so like each of the kids have a different story. Some of them noticed things, some of them didn't. It was all about Joe's how do I say that, morphing into who he felt like he needed to be at the moment, whether he had allowed himself to feel this. And it really wasn't until the end with the cancer. I felt like his cancer diagnosis brought him back to us. It made him extremely humble, extremely human, and just able to feel things, like whether he was scared or whether he was hurt or whether he was vulnerable. He was actually able to feel those things that he hadn't felt in forever. He hadn't allowed himself to feel that. Why could you? I don't know whether it was some sort of survivor's guilt. I don't know whether you could call it that, or whether it was just how horrific it was of everything they had seen down there and couldn't talk about it. You know, it wasn't like they sat around in the kitchen, you know, having dinner, talking about their feelings. They just didn't do that. You know, and the kids, what I had realized, had suffered so much from secondhand PTSD from watching this behavior. And again, like I said, he wasn't violent, he wasn't a monster. But when you're watching how to hide your emotions or hide your feelings and manifesting these things into other areas, it's a learned behavior. So even after Joe passed away, when we were all sort of able to be like, what just happened? Like, what did we just go through? What do you mean it's over now? It was sort of like the whole, it's over. Like, can we take a breath? Can we talk about this? So each of them, you know, they've come up with different, you know, I have one that has bipolar, and again, I don't know if it's proven that you can blame it on, but during those formative years, like, was this a reason? Like, did we do this to her? And then come to find out that we're not the only ones. There's a world full of these children, first responder related children, in talking with other groups, different households, different, how do you say that? Different areas that you live in, different demographics. All of a sudden, though, these kids, all the same ages, in their 20s, going through the same thing. Hurt, can't hold jobs, some drug abuse, just behavior that you wouldn't expect coming from families where you think everything is stable. It turns out the one common denominator, though, again, was 9/11, was what they've lived through. These kids grew up with this. They know nothing else. You know, they didn't know, they weren't able to shut it off the next day. This was their life from then on. You know, everything revolves around 9/11. It starts to get a little crazy around August. You start feeling all the pressure. You remember it. You remember walking on eggshells in August. That early it starts. you know, and then when you're dealing with, like, if some of them go away to school and then you're dealing with areas that don't understand what you're going through, it's sort of like people did forget, that kind of thing. So it plays a little bit of a game, you know, but like you're going to keep this thing to the point where nobody has to do #never forget. You won't allow it. It's almost like #Shelli won't allow it, you know, like this. But yeah, because it's hard to retell the story to somebody who doesn't get it, to people that just don't understand it. And they sympathize with you and they empathize with you. And that's beautiful. It's what you want. You don't want it to be an like once a year thing, though. It's not Christmas. For these families of 9/11, post 9/11, it's an everyday thing. Like I said before, never forget. Well, we didn't know we had an option to forget. You know, this is their lives. That's what they've grown up. It's all they know. It's all we know. So when it stops, like it did with Joe, technically it didn't, because my life kept going with a beautiful group of women I wish I had never met. And through you, you know, I love you to death and I wish I had never met you. You know, no, we bonded over your love of this and your passion about making sure this happens, making sure that this stays alive.
But you're talking about the widows of...
Yeah, I hate that word. So
I do too. The wives of fallen post 9/11.
Here's what I call us: newly unsupervised women. Because the word unsupervised leads to a little bit more of glamorous life than widow. I can't stand the word widow.
But you meet, but you all meet. And so these are the women you wish you never had to get close to.
I've never met them. They're the most beautiful, loving, considerate group of women. And each of us came from different backgrounds. We all have the same story. All of us have the exact same story. And a lot of them have spoken with you. You know, and different age groups, but it's just, they're all incredible. And how strong we all can be. You know, and it's just, so that part of the whole thing is really surreal. Because something beautiful came out of something so beautifully tragic. You know, but
is there anything else you want to add? I
just hope that if somebody does see this and you're going through it, whether it's PTSD with yourself, your husband, your first responder, or your children, talk to somebody. You have to get there. We're here. We're here to help. You know, I started something right before COVID of speaking with the fire department, health department, of getting these children understood and talked to, because there's different things that go on where you can have therapy and you can have this. These kids need more than just therapy sessions. They need to tell their story, and they need to be able to openly talk about it and believe that it's okay. You know, and maybe people would understand 9/11 is not just one day a year. It's a lifestyle, if you will. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. It's our lives, though. And it affected these children throughout all of theirs. So if somebody's listening and they feel, you know, a story or part of this touch them, well, we're here. Just reach out. Family Assistance Unit. You know, you can call them and they'll put you in our direction and we'll help you. We'll talk you through this, even if it's a one-time deal, you know, but your kids need help. Whether what you think may not have been the reason was. You know, but I love you and I appreciate you for doing this always.
I love you too, Ann Stach. You're the best.